The sky didn't fall, it just sagged. Slow and white, like a sigh exhaled from heaven. Snow crawled across the glass in pale streaks, muffling the world in a kind of hush that could drive a woman mad, or save her, depending on how far gone she already was. Sara didn't think of herself as broken, not out loud anyway, but something had snapped, like a rib beneath grief, like a bone that chose silence instead of healing. The mountain cabin was her grandfather's, though he hadn't walked its floorboards in years. After the funeral, she found the keys in a rusted coffee can, like some half-hearted invitation. She took it. Took the map, too, and the last thing he'd written, "Come home if you forget who you are." That had been 3 weeks ago. Now, the world outside had vanished in a white curtain. Trees bent with the weight of silence. Ice framed the windows like stained glass. Inside, the fire crackled. Low, stubborn. The wind sighed against the chimney, but it couldn't reach her. Not anymore. Sara curled in the old armchair, legs tucked beneath her, cradling a tin mug of lukewarm coffee. Her hair hung damp over one shoulder. She hadn't bothered drying it after washing in the frigid basin. She didn't care. Let it freeze. She'd come here to be alone, not to heal. Healing was for people who believed something better was coming. Sara just wanted stillness. No sirens. No apologies. No more hospital walls breathing artificial hope. Just her heartbeat, slow and human, thudding in a body that still belonged to her. A thud. She froze. Not inside, not her pulse, not her breath. Outside, at the door. One thud, then another. Slow, heavy. Not fists, not wind. Like something leaning. She stood, not fast, but ready. The old instincts from survival training kicked in. Don't make noise. Don't startle what you can't see. She moved toward the door on bare feet. The wood was cold beneath her, worn smooth by boots long dead. Another thud. Then silence. She reached the door, laid her palm against it. Something was breathing on the other side. She could feel it in her bones. She unlatched the top window, the one her grandfather used for checking on bears. The blizzard hissed in through the crack. She peered out. 2 wolves. One stood like frost, unmoving, pale-coated, eyes sharp as broken ice. The other limped. Blood soaked the snow at his feet. His coat was silver, matted with red. He leaned against the door as if it was the last thing keeping him upright. Sara's breath caught. Logic screamed, "Shut the window, bolt the door, grab the rifle." But the silver wolf looked up, and she remembered. Eyes. She remembered eyes like that. Back when she was lying crushed in a ditch, blinking through her own blood, barely conscious. A man had pulled her out, coat flapping like wings, eyes wild and silver bright. He hadn't stayed, just lifted her into safety, whispered something she couldn't hear, and vanished before the ambulance came. She never got his name. But the eyes, they were the same. She didn't decide. Her body did, like breath, like blinking. She opened the door. The storm rushed in like a scream. Snow swirled around her legs, kissed her cheeks with teeth. The white wolf, Frost, she would call him later, didn't move. But the silver one staggered forward, breath rattling in his ribs, and collapsed just past the threshold. Sara dragged him in. Frost followed, slow and deliberate. He didn't touch her, didn't growl, just watched. She shut the door, latched it. The cabin held its breath. The silver wolf, Silver, was worse than she thought. A jagged wound tore across his flank, as if something huge and clawed had tried to rip him open. His breathing came in shudders. She fetched her kit. Hot water, cloth torn from the old curtains, whiskey, thread. She'd done this before. On herself, on others. Skin was skin, muscle, muscle. Blood didn't lie. Frost sat in the corner, unmoving, watching her with a gaze that never blinked. She worked in silence. The fire snapped once and Silver flinched. Not like an animal, not fear of pain, but shame. Like someone afraid to be seen bleeding. Sara paused, needle in hand. For a heartbeat, she thought, he knows. That was madness. Wolves don't know. Still, she murmured soft words, soothing. Not because he'd understand them, but because she needed to say them. Because some wounds demanded more than stitching. When she was done, she wrapped Silver in the old army blanket and sat beside him. She didn't cry. Not yet. The storm howled too loud for tears. By the second day, she gave them names. It felt stupid at first, but the silence pressed too heavy on her ribs, and names were lighter than loneliness. Silver lay near the hearth, breathing shallow but steady. His wounds seeped, but not badly. She changed the dressing, whispered his name like a lullaby. He watched her, always watched. His eyes never wandered, never blinked. Frost remained near the back window like a sentinel, like he didn't trust her, or didn't trust this. Once, she caught him growling at his reflection in the glass, low and guttural, like it was a predator. She stopped looking in the mirror after that. The third day, she spoke aloud. "Do you believe in curses?" Neither wolf answered. Of course they didn't. But Silver's ears twitched. Sara sipped from her mug. The fire cracked behind her, bathing them all in orange hush. "I used to believe in second chances," she said softly. "Now I'm not sure I even believe in mornings." Outside, snow fell like ash. She traced the rim of her cup. "There was a man once, pulled me from a car wreck, disappeared before I could say anything. I still see him in dreams. I think..." She stopped, laughed, bitter and breathless. "I think he saved me before I decided I wanted saving."
Silver blinked. Once. Frost shifted. Sara stared into the flames. "What do you do with grace you didn't ask for?" She didn't expect an answer, but something inside her, the part that hadn't spoken in months, whispered, "You become it." By the fifth day, the storm showed signs of exhaustion. The wind wept more than screamed. Light filtered through the drifts, not warmth, but the idea of it. Silver stood. His wounds still raw, but his stance was steady. He limped to the center of the room and stared at the door, not out of longing, out of waiting. Sara watched him, her breath fogged the air. "What are you waiting for?" He turned and for the first time walked toward her, not lunged, not stalked, walked, slow, cautious, human. He sat in front of her and placed one paw on her knee. Her breath caught, not because of fear, because of recognition. And in the silence that followed, she whispered, "I know you." Silver closed his eyes, and somewhere deep in the woods, a curse stirred. The snow had stopped falling, not fully, but enough that silence felt less like a threat and more like a question. Sara didn't sleep that night. She lay curled beneath a blanket stitched by her grandmother's hands, heart drumming against ribs like it was looking for an exit. Silver's paw print still warmed her leg. She hadn't moved. Not when he touched her. Not after he pulled away.
Outside, Frost paced, not frantically, but like he was measuring the earth, deciding what belonged to him and what didn't. His eyes never left the shadows between the trees. Something was coming. Morning arrived in pale colours. Not light, but something pretending to be. The cabin held its breath. Sara boiled water for oatmeal she didn't eat. Silver sniffed it, then returned to the hearth. Frost didn't come in. She watched the door like it might disappear, like it might become teeth. The memory was loud today. The crash, the scream. Her body folded into a space too small for living, and then hands, smoke. A voice she never heard clearly, silver eyes. Derek. That name never came then, but now it hummed beneath her skin. She didn't know where it came from, she only knew it was his. That afternoon, Sara opened the door. Not far, just enough for her breath to reach the edge of the cold. Frost turned to her, ears flicked back. "Go," she said softly. He stared at her, motionless. "I won't stop you." His gaze moved past her, to Silver, who didn't lift his head. Then Frost stepped toward her, close enough to smell the wilderness on his coat. Then he touched his nose to her hand, brief, cold, and returned to the trees. She stood there for a long while after. Silver didn't move. By evening, the silence had changed shape. It wasn't absence. It was waiting. Sara sat near the fire, Silver's flank rising and falling beside her. She read aloud from a book she found on the shelf, stories about old gods and hungering beasts, about men who forgot their names and women who remembered too much. Silver listened. His eyes followed her voice like it was a trail through snow. She stopped reading when the light died. He moved closer, not in threat, in trust. And when she touched him again, fingers resting on the ridge of his back, he didn't flinch. Neither did she. The next night, she dreamt, not of the accident, but of a forest split by moonlight. She stood in the clearing, barefoot, wrapped in the same blanket. Before her, a man, back turned, shirt torn, blood weeping from his ribs. She called to him. No sound came. He turned. It was Silver. No, not Silver, not Wolf. Man, Derek. His eyes the same, but human now. Wounded. Beautiful in the way ruins are beautiful. Not because they survived, but because they didn't. He opened his mouth, said her name. She woke in the dark. The storm came back, angry. Wind whipped against the cabin like fists. Trees groaned. Somewhere in the distance, a howl. Long, ragged. Not wolf, not quite. Sara stood by the window, fingers clenched around the curtain. She didn't want to see what was out there. That part of her knew. This wasn't just weather. This was reckoning. Silver rose behind her, alert. His fur bristled. Not fear. Readiness. She moved to him without thinking, laying her hand over his wound. His breath hitched, but he didn't pull away. "Is it coming for you?" she asked. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night they slept curled together, not as woman and beast, but as something older, as grief and grace, as fracture and fusion. When she woke, her hand rested over his heart. It beat slow, steady, like hers. Morning broke with blood. She found it near the tree line, claw marks in the snow. Tracks like something had been dragged, flesh, frost. He was gone. Sara's stomach turned. The trees didn't move. The sky offered no clue. But the air had changed, hungrier, colder. When she returned to the cabin, Silver met her at the door. And for the first time, he growled. She barred the door, loaded the rifle, lit every candle. The fire cracked, but the warmth didn't reach her. "What are you?" she whispered. Silver didn't look at her. He just limped to the window and sat, watching, waiting. By dusk, she broke. The silence inside her shattered like glass, and the words spilled out, ugly, tangled, raw. "I didn't ask to be saved." Silver blinked. "I was ready to die. That day in the car, I was ready. And you, he, whoever, pulled me out. And now I'm stuck with this half-life, with memories that don't go anywhere, with a name I can't forget." Silver's ears flicked. His eyes never left her. "I thought if I came here I'd remember who I was," her voice cracked. "But maybe I was never anyone to begin with." She sat on the floor, knees to her chest. Silver crossed the room and rested his head in her lap. She wept, not because she was sad, because she wasn't alone. Because something in her cracked open, not in pain but in welcome, and the snow outside began to fall gently again. The storm lingered, but the violence drained from it, like an old anger finally spent. Snow still fell, but soft now, rhythmic. A hush instead of a howl.
Inside the cabin, warmth lived in small things. The steady pulse of the fire, the rustle of fur as Silver shifted in his sleep. The way Sara began to hum under her breath when stirring oats. Not songs, just sound. Just seemed to break. Silver lay nearby, eyes half closed, but listening. But I never dreamed of this. She smiled, barely. 2 wolves and a ghost of a woman. She paused. You're not a ghost, though. She met his eyes. I think you're the only real thing in my life. And for the first time, he came to her not with wounds, but with intention. He rested his head against her chest. Her heartbeat quickened, not with fear, with recognition. The days blurred. She stopped counting time in hours, counted it in glances, in breaths, in the way Silver leaned into her shoulder without apology. Sometimes she thought she heard footsteps outside. Sometimes she thought she dreamed them. Once she found a single paw print, too large for any wolf, pressed into the snow just beyond the tree line. She didn't speak of it. Neither did Silver. She remembered more of Derek as the days passed, the way his hands had lifted her from the wreckage, the smell of pine on his jacket, the silver glint in his gaze. Too bright, too wild to be human. I never said thank you, she murmured once. Silver blinked, and for a moment his body shimmered, just faintly, as if light itself was unsure what shape he wore. Then it was gone. Sara reached out and touched his muzzle. Maybe I don't have to. One morning, she found herself laughing. Real laughter, soft, surprised, leaking from her lips like something sacred. Silver had tried to carry a log to the hearth and tripped over his own paws. When he looked at her, sheepish and confused, something broke loose inside her, a joy that had forgotten how to speak. He huffed, insulted. She threw a snowball at him through the open window. He dodged it with the elegance of a prince. They didn't speak, but they said everything. When she sat beside the fire, and Silver leaned his weight against her back, she felt a kind of wholeness she hadn't believed existed.
ice. She bent low, filling the pail. Then the world shifted. A sound. Heavy, wet, wrong. A growl so deep it tasted like iron in her teeth. She turned, and the bear was there. It was massive, mangy, eyes sunken from winter's famine, ribs like jagged shelves. Foam ringed its mouth. It didn't charge at first, just breathed, watching her, assessing. Behind her, the door was still open. She backed toward it. "Silver," she called, voice steady. "Inside, now." The bear lunged. Time collapsed. She remembered her grandfather's voice. "Don't run, don't scream, don't make yourself prey." She didn't. She grabbed the pail and flung it. Water scattered like glass. The bear flinched. She reached for the axe half buried in the woodpile. Then Silver was there, no hesitation, no pause.
He collided with the bear in a blur of fur and fury, snarling, biting, pushing with everything he had. The bear roared, swiped. Silver flew into the snow, yelping. And that's when Sara moved. She didn't think. She remembered. The rifle, the one above the mantel. She grabbed it, loaded it with fingers that didn't tremble, stepped outside. The bear loomed over Silver, massive paws raised. Sara screamed. "No!" The bear turned. She fired. Not at its head, not to kill. At the earth. The shot cracked the silence like thunder, exploding snow, echoing into the trees. The bear paused, then fled. It didn't matter why, it only mattered that it did. Sara dropped the rifle and ran. Silver lay still. No blood this time, not like before, but he was shaking, breathing like he'd run for miles. She dropped to her knees beside him, pressed her the wrong people and stopped trusting the right ones. He looked at her, eyes shining. The curse wasn't the wolf. It was the isolation, the silence. I could only become human again if someone trusted me, fully, even when I couldn't.
The fire was no longer for survival, but for sharing, for warmth that had nothing to do with cold. She watched him laugh once, deep and real, tilting his head back like it was the first joy he'd allowed himself. And Sara, for the first time in her remembered life, didn't feel alone. Remembered what it meant to be human. The trees echoed the names long after